Namaskar. This is Engineer Suraj Singh, professional engineer. I was deliberating about the engineering articles on video, and it's now serial number 4 article. Engineering-based development appraisal to general public. Professional awareness, backbone of any nation. Hidden works, RE/ER discipline engineers, promoters, building products by me, as professional engineer Suraj Singh, New Delhi. The world of engineering sciences, their applications, impact on the economy, health, safety and environment, quality, society, all relevant and others. Buildings construction in Bharat and advice to general public, civil engineering planning and designs in buildings, description of buildings and requirements, who are involved. It is your money. Engineering science applies to the whole world. Developments, engineering is the basis of any society. Without engineering, the human had to remain ancient. Civil engineering is the basis of all structures and infrastructures. Designs and plannings of buildings is a vast discipline. Buildings is the most significant commodity to make a lifetime purchase. Engineering is an art-based science with widest network. In fact, engineering is a mind religion. Without engineering, a Ramayana could not be completed. In Mahabharata, the building was set on fire. Ram Setu is also a marvel of ancient engineering, not learned from any university, but from Vishwakarma. The universal engineer, you have a right to check about your building. It should be well returned. Return means in the potential of use and in the potential of economy and investment. Without engineering, nothing is possible. Yet, professionals are most unbeneficial as society is unaware about their sacrifices. The public has to look into the pros and cons of the engineering and recognize the efforts contributed by the engineers. The purchaser has to involve self to contribute for the better product. No politics can sustain the national advancement without the role of engineering. Engineers can change the national power and status in the world. Engineers are to be credited the due social regards. The engineers are not seen in public but must be recognized for the sake of better understanding and given due status and regards. In most cases, engineers intend to deliver good quality products, but due to special circumstances of commercial benefits to the promoters or businessmen, they have reservations as well. All other professions shall be worthless without the contribution by engineering in the global scenario. Engineering travels its journey from a dream to a made-up project, a dream coming true. Buildings are a must for the operations of all other professions. Do not allow your building to convert to a graveyard. Building is not meant for a day or for a month, but for generations to come. Save your generations from dying or under the threat or under the collapse of the structure or under the threat of the danger or under the threat of being destabilized any time during any earthquake or any heavy winds, etc. The public of the whole world living on the earth has been developing various nations as well as the globe. The contributions from all fields of human life are responsible to make it. But a considerable contribution comes from the fields of engineering. Of all disciplines, without the contribution of engineering, the life shall cease. The history is full of various legends of engineering all over the globe. Though there was no engineering education in those days, yet the minds were full of engineering knowledge, inculcated either by the God gifts or by the clan works inherited from ancestors, artisans. Engineering contributes from the manufacturing of the needle to the space vessels and many others, higher profile articles. All systems are articles or applications. All systems are running based on any branch of engineering. The engineering involves a part of art, part of applied mathematics, and part of applied sciences, and part of health, safety, and environment. With the assistance of all codes and the engineering contributions from various engineering disciplines are required to accomplish any small task or manufactured piece. The civil engineer takes the lead at the initial stages and contributes to the full execution of any project. The buildings are the creations of the architecture and the structural engineers with credited supports of the subsidiary disciplinary engineers. When then, then the workers, specialists as well as common, also owe respect from the society, as without their laborious contribution, the people, workers cannot live in, the peoples cannot live in beautiful houses, work in beautiful buildings. Houses is a pious place for the people who have to live in that for decades, while for a promoter or for a builder, it's just like the process. Like processing in a factory for market profit, at the risk of those who use being active supervisor yourself. I am continuing from the previous article. It's point number 22. I am going to tell you about that. The honor appointed engineer or the architect, whose name is included on the undertaking to supervise the construction of the project, invites the contractors for necessary tendering or quotations, as the case could be or may be, depending on the nature of the possible contracts. The details of the bill of quantities are either worked out by the engineer, that is issued as a part of tender documents but without any legal or contractual application, or the tender works out the quantities himself. Whatever could be the cause, whatever could be the case, in either way, the contractor shall be responsible to check himself the scope of his work in case the works refers to or resembles to lump sum type of contract in nature. While the item rate contract does not bother much to the contractor, as a set percentage shall be accepted as deviation on the indicated quantities in the bill of quantities. All drawings, all specifications and the materials requirements are issued to the bidder as a package in a big size projects, while for the smaller one, direct negotiations are made based on either the coverage unit or on the calculated quantities of materials. Lump sum contracts are not very attractive when the market price fluctuation is imminent. Moreover, the engineer has to issue all drawings and details while the required specifications. With the required specifications, then the lump sum form of contract is to be executed as an adoption for the construction of the project building. The engineer or the architect receives the field tenders or quoted tenders, or even the owner can receive in his office, and then send that to the engineer or the architect for scrutiny purpose and recommendations thereby. All the bidders are enlisted, and the procedure of scrutiny and negotiation starts from the lowest of three parties, if available. The engineer raises many questions for clarification to ascertain that the bidder has covered all the bid requirements commercially as well as technically. Actually, in the profession, it is the only functional stage of execution when the bidder has the right to alter the price or even withdraw, subject to the confiscation or forfeiture of the tender bond amount, if so specified. The best competitive bidder or party is recommended by the engineer or the architect to the owner for the issue of the award letter based on the detailed negotiations. All the correspondences, clarifications, etc. constitutes the part of the contract as contract documents. All the documents are prepared as the legally valid contractual documents, and the contract form is executed on any suitable day following the award date. The award letter is adequate document to instruct the contractor to commence with the job, mentioning the start date and the date of contractual completion. In case of major projects where the engineer requires support of engineers on the site to supervise on behalf of the appointed engineer. The powers of the resident engineer, that is RE, are described on the award letter itself, given the name of the appointed resident engineer or engineer's representative, as we call him. It is suggest herein that you shall find in the government, particularly the engineers, using the title before the name as ER. Actually, this refers to the ER, which stands for engineer's representative and not as engineer. The engineer's representative or the resident engineer acts on behalf of the engineers mentioned in the contract, but cannot decide the contractual issues on his own, but seeks the decisions from the engineer. All site powers are delegated to the resident engineer, that is RE, for the purpose of work supervision, but no other decisions can be taken. The engineer can overturn any decision taken by the resident engineer. The resident engineer cannot deviate from the drawings issued by the engineer for the purpose of execution without the prior permission of the engineer. The resident engineer on any major project is the chief engineer to supervise the job on site or on project. No works can move without the consent of the resident engineer, yet contractually, the resident engineer has no importance, no powers. The resident engineer has to deal with the provisions on the contract between the owner and the contractor. The resident engineer receives the prime instructions from the engineer, while the engineer, according to management contract between the owner and the engineer, receives the instructions from the owner in all matters. Whatever works are carried out by the contractor on site cannot be approved without the inspection of the resident engineer or his assistants attached on site for various disciplines. These assisting discipline engineers report to the resident engineer for all practical purposes. It is the responsibility of the resident engineer through the engineering assistants that all the works are to be inspected to ensure that the compliance to the contract documents is confirmed with payment to the works carried out by the contractor or claimed as works valuations are prepared by the contractor's agent on site and agreed after the thorough checking between the contractor's agent on site and agreed after the thorough checking between the contractor's agent and the resident engineer, or on his behalf the quantity surveyor, that the bill is to the mark. The resident engineer then forwards the certified amount to the engineer for the processing and approval of valuations regularly on a monthly basis. It's very significant in the interest of the smooth running of the project that the payment should be made to the contractor regularly within a reasonable defined time, so that the contractor successfully keeps pace with the scheduled program of the construction execution to be in line with the agreed schedule. During the construction phase, in general, the structural items such as reinforcing walls, fixing, concrete framing items, concrete quality control items are recommended to be supervised under the controls of a structural engineer, so that any decision taken should be in line with the structural requirement. The structural engineer has to keep in touch with the progress on the site through the project engineer or the resident engineer. All the items of electrical discipline have to be executed under the supervision of an electrical engineer, reporting to the resident engineer. Air conditioning discipline by the mechanical engineer, so specialized, reporting to resident engineer. Sanitary and drainage or water supply by a plumbing engineer or a specialized, reporting to a resident engineer. Instrumentation by an instrumentation engineer, so specialized, etc. It is the responsibility of these discipline engineers that the works are carried out in line with the specifications, drawings, and the applicable codes, keeping in view a good engineering and industrial practice. All building services are to be tested during the construction phases as Fix 1 and Fix 2. The final testing shall have to be conducted at the completion stage. The objective of provisions of these services is that these must serve the building for the design duration efficiently, subject to proper maintenance. Therefore, it can be seen that the design and construction is not one-man show in the building construction industry or building construction field. Relevant grades of skilled artisans are required to accomplish various category works. All these workers are generally trained by practice. Very few are available, duly certified, and with having certified certificates of diploma or any other syllabus or any other program. Most of these technicians understand fully the works and the scope of the discipline, but they lack in the knowledge of theory that is replenished by the presence of the disciplined engineers. So far, we have been moving around the gross activities of the discipline of building designs and constructions. Now we shall start contemplating about the execution of construction part of any building in considerable detail, so that the information is well understood by the public in general. An attempt shall be in any stage that the contents are written as simple as possible in a simple language, so that all interested non-engineering people could have a grasp about what happens in the field. I also have a degree of hope that the other engineers having extensive experience shall also issue columns giving more introspection of the subject matter for the dissemination to the public, who should be aware about the discipline by knowing the ins and outs of the buildings and various other structures. The general public has been unaware about the requirements on the buildings, as it is directly related to them, and the so-called builders and the promoters do the way as easy as possible for themselves, without considering the durability of the criteria of the building, and without any other criteria necessary to be inculcated within the construction of buildings. Buildings is very, very complicated item, very, very complicated article for a person. The purchaser should have a capacity to raise questions to the seller about the building product, so that the money is well spent. And I had written a book about the civil engineering building practice that was published in 1996 by CBS publisher Triag Engineering Delhi. And in that book I had covered some points of my practical experience. For example, here I was discussing about the engineer actually. Actually, in contract, there's a contract between a builder or a constructor, or it is a management contract between a builder or a contractor and the owner. Owner means yourself. You are having a building, you are giving it for a contract. A person shall come to you or a company shall come to you and they will give you offer, a tender. There is a contract between the two, a constructor and an owner. The construction contract shall be supervised by a manager or by an engineer, a project manager. That engineer here is very important term. It's not only a degree qualified engineer I'm talking. Engineer in construction contract. There's a contract, again I'm telling you, there is a contract between the owner, that is you, and between the constructor or the contractor or builder. This is construction contract. It may be exclusively construct contract, or it would be EPC, that is engineering project management. EPC is applied for very big and technological projects. Here we are talking about buildings. Generally, here designer is one, promoter is one, or owner is one, and contractor is another one. So one party is owner, on one side is engineer, on one side is user or owner. Now owner has to deal with both. Owner has to deal with the engineer, and owner has to deal with the constructor. Owner has a very big responsibility here, because ultimately he will use the building. Engineer, here I am talking about that consultant whom owner has entrusted for the work of designs and supervisions. For the design there could be one, or for the supervision there could be other one, but both will be called engineer. On one side he will deal with the contractor, and engineer and contractor are in line. So there is a triangle. On one corner of the triangle is sitting owner, that is you. On one corner of the triangle is sitting engineer, and on the other corner, third corner, is sitting the contractor. So there is a triangular chain, and there is hierarchy in all those. Generally, honors don't have hierarchy except in the government or in some major companies. But here we are talking of engineer. This engineer is contractual, and this contractor is also contractual. But there are two types of contracts. One is construction contract, I just explained to you, between the contractor and the owner. There's another type of contract that should be between the owner and the engineer. That is project management contract. So one contract is project management and one contract is project construction. Now I am talking about hierarchy of engineers. This engineer is by Indian Contracts Act, and that contract is also by Indian Contracts Act, because both are having contracts of different nature. So engineer, here I am telling you, the person who is responsible for the design and supervision of a building, planning, design and supervision of any building, I am calling him by the contractual term engineer. It doesn't mean he should be a qualified engineer. He could be an architect also. So any architect, any engineer, whoever signs a management contract between owner and the engineering consultant is called engineer. That is what I have referred to, engineer. And that engineer is on the having to deal with the contractor and with the owner. With the contractor, he will issue all designs to the contractor through the owner. He will supervise the work of the contractor through the owner. This is very important mark to understand here, because always there exists a high degree of confusion, a mix-up. Now this engineer, and there will be a professional management of contractor as well, because contractor means there is a considerable project size. Constructor or contractor must be a professional party. They should have their own team of engineers, execution engineers. They are called construction engineers. This will be called design and supervision engineers. That hierarchy would be construction engineers. And there could be additional supervision on behalf of owner, with the owner himself. He could also employ one more engineer to supervise contractors and engineers' job. Let us forget that for the time being, as we are discussing the management of engineer. Engineer has one engineer title. That is chief engineer, you can say, or engineer, you can say. Below him will be resident engineer or ER, engineer's representative. And he will have assistants on site and assistants in design. In designs, he will have different categories of engineers, different specialists: structural design engineer, mechanical design engineer, electrical design engineer, plumbing design engineer, instrumentation and quantity surveyors, and many other classes of engineers. Liaison engineers for the government to get the building permit, etc. All these he will have. He will assist him. He gets assistance from all these. Similarly, he will have staff on site. On site, he could have clerk of work, supervisors, etc., who will all report to the resident engineer. On the other side, you can see with the contractors. Contractor shall have a site agent and also a contract agent. A contract agent or a site agent is a representative of the contractor who reports to the consultant, the engineer, as well as to the owner. Generally, he deals most of his times with the engineer's representative on site, that is a resident engineer, as well as he reports to the engineer also. He reports to the owner also through the engineer. This is what the management is all about, single management. Now, contractor management reports to engineers. Here, engineer has a vast duty statutorily, because engineer, if he takes the fee, if he draws the fee from the owner, he is fully responsible for the design, for the design safety, and for the supervision of the works carried out by the contractor. If he is employee of the owner, in that case he gets salary only. In that case his responsibility will not be absolute but relative only, because he is getting just salary and all his staff is getting salary. But when he is taking fee, he has utmost responsibility. He has statutory responsibility. He has contractual responsibility. Engineer as a person or as a board of directors, whoever they are, all are responsible. Others they may employ, like they may employ resident engineer, they may employ structural engineer, they may employ quality supervision engineer, they may employ any planning engineer, and any class of engineers they could employ. All these engineers have very defined responsibilities. Similarly, contractor will employ his own team. He will employ project engineer or site agent or project manager or construction manager, or employ project engineer, site engineer, supervisors, foremen. All parties have to employ like this, and they have their defined responsibilities, because the Objective of the contractor is to do a good job on site according to the drawings given by the issued by the engineer, and specifications given by the engineer, and directions given by the engineer, and whatever contract documents state he has to comply with all those requirements. Why engineer has to produce all these documents? He has produced everything to the contractor through the owner, and engineer is responsible for the planning aspect, for the budget aspect, for getting building permit, for issuing all designs, for issuing tender documents, for receiving tender documents, for checking the correctness of everything, every document. He has to supervise the job from time to time, from the beginning of the project, commencement of the project, throughout the stage of the project, all the stages of the projects, and then completion and close out and commissioning and pre-commissioning and everything. It's very massive, so massive type of responsibility, because construction has hundreds of stages. Even if the building is small, the documentation is the same. You construct one small building or you construct a very big building, you will have hundreds of items, and the engineer has to deal with all those items. Constructor has to deal with all those items. It's not so easy. It's very complicated, in fact, and we have to appreciate the efforts by all parties, by engineer, by contractor, owner, of course you are, and statutory officers. Now, engineer has a lot of dealing with the municipalities, with authorities. They have to see what is required of the building, what is the type of bylaws apply, how the design is to be done, how the building permit is to be applied, how various stages of the building are to be covered for getting various types of certificates. This all statutory and license responsibility has to be taken care of by the engineer or his staff. But here we will call engineer. Similarly, contractor will have his management, like project manager or site agent or contractor agent. He will take his part of the responsibility to support the engineer wherever it is required. For example, services approval, which is mandatory on behalf of engineer, he could do according to the provisions on the construction contract. Similarly, if there is some other requirement, telephone, you can say removal of some line, or there is some existing service anywhere that requires redirection, that contractor has to take care of through the help of engineer. All these are very, very complicated, because if there's any live service, contractor has no right to break it. The information is to be given to the relevant authority and to the engineer as well. And what actions are to be taken shall be directed to the contractor and to the engineer. So here it's very, very complicated. Engineer also does a lot of job, while contractor has to do equally important job. Contractor has to do job in construction details on site, while engineer has to do the job in design details in his design office. It's very, very minute exercise, actually, you can say. Engineer has to see each and every detail in thoughts, in producing on the paper, again reviewing that, proof checking that, issuing the designs, and getting the designs approved by the municipalities for obtaining building permit, and then issuing the drawings for the tender, specs for the tender, other documents for the tender, handing over the site to the contractor, and then supervising the work of the contractor, all activities of the contractor, holding meetings with the contractor, monthly evaluation, weekly meeting, monthly meeting, until the project is over. It's very, very big responsibility if you see the fact is, and I think no single project is complete in all respects, but here engineer, and you can say, if not full engineer, resident engineer and contractor's agent both have to cooperate fully. Absolute cooperation must exist for a good type of project. Otherwise, it shall be very, very difficult for the project to be completed in a very good sense. Engineer, as I told, is fully responsible financially, design stability wise, design execution wise, contract wise, and budget wise. And his responsibility is delegated by himself by the appointment of a resident engineer or engineer's representative, who on site is delegated all the responsibilities as defined to the resident engineer for controlling the contractor. Resident engineer is responsible to ascertain, to make sure that the work done by the contractor complies with the requirement of the project specifications, project designs, project requirements, contract requirement, and he has to approve all the works carried out on site by the contractor. This is very important. But he cannot sanction anything extra other than as required on the designs. He cannot approve anything which is not in the drawings. He has to comply with everything. He can not spend a single amount of money, a single amount of item without taking permission from the engineer. Engineer has to instruct him. If there is some requirement which is necessary, then he has to write to the engineer. He has to issue the site instruction, but site instruction cannot be authenticated. Only engineer's instruction is valid in law. So site engineer, when receives an instruction, or a project engineer when receives an instruction as a site instruction from the resident engineer, he has the right to say that issue this engineer's instruction so that there is a constitution of cost variations which we as a contractor can claim, and until that he has a right not to execute that extra work. But in case he gets an instruction from the resident engineer, no, it shall be paid, and he gets the approval from the engineer, then it's okay. The work can be carried out. I'm just giving an example. It happens many times. Engineer is fully authorized, but engineer can overrule resident engineer decision on site. Any approval given by resident engineer on site is not necessary the final approval. Full engineer, that is contractual engineer, has full right to re-inspect the work, any work, or reject any work approved by the resident engineer through the quality engineer, because nowadays quality assurance, quality requirement and quality engineers, their inspectors are also employed on behalf of the engineer and on behalf of the owner. They check everything on behalf of engineers. Engineer does not necessarily involve himself directly on physical sites. Quality engineer has full authority on behalf of engineer, and they are independent officers, independent engineers. They check all the works, they check all the qualities, they inspect all works. They issue remedial notes, they issue non-compliance reports, they issue so many documents, they issue ITs and check the job, they issue concrete orders, they issue so many activities. They close out the report, they make the close out report, they inspect everything, and they certify everything. They supervise the laboratories even, because all matters are tested. So